Once the players have collected all 3 radio pieces and one character has all 3, they can go ahead and assemble the radio. Now let's say Al has the radio pieces. He still has room in his hand for 2 cabin cards. He's going to spend one of his actions to build the radio, literally assembling the puzzle. Now this only takes up 1 space in his hand, so Al actually has 2 empty spaces now. Let's say he uses his next action to call for rescue. That means he's going to get the van token, roll 1 of the die. I rolled a 1, that means the van is going to show up in arc number 1. The goal of the game now for the human players is to get out into the woods and into the van. Once the van has been called, the player holding the radio still has some options. On their turn, they can spend 1 action to move the van either 1 space clockwise or counterclockwise in the woods. The van never comes any closer to the cabin, but it can be moved around if the players think it's going to be easier to reach the van. Also, when the van moves into a space that has a zombie in it, they can do 1 point of damage to that zombie as they run it over. In this case, Al just told the driver of the van to run over this shambler. For characters to enter the van, it's important to remember that it takes 1 movement to reach the van from the woods. So if Julie were the first player and chose to spend both of her movements or action points for movement, she would move into the woods for her first action and into the van for her second. She's now safe, which means she's essentially out of the game. All of her cards are immediately discarded, and because she was the first player, she passes the bait token to the next player clockwise. In this case, Al is now the bait player. The first player to reach the van takes over the duties of navigation, which means on their next turn, they no longer perform actions or anything like that. They have 1 thing they can do, and that would be move the van 1 space clockwise or counterclockwise, the same way the player who had the radio could. Now that someone's in the van, the radio no longer works that way. Instead, it's a club. Al has essentially 1 more weapon in his arsenal as he tries to reach the van now. The second player to reach the van, and any subsequent players, no longer perform their normal actions on the perform actions phase. Instead, they get to shoot. They have 1 bullet in an imaginary rifle they can shoot, which essentially means up to 3 spaces away. So let's assume for this scenario, Al reached the van on his last turn. Now that it's the next perform actions phase, Al can choose to shoot a zombie anywhere up to 3 spaces away. This means he could shoot a brute or a creeper to help his fellow players out. Let's say he decides to shoot the brute, doing 1 point of damage, ending his turn.